Good morning, Tartaria Australia, autodidactic, and we have Jeff here from We Are Change Melbourne. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you. It's delightful to do another broadcast. The last show was well received. The viewers were very receptive to the information, which is wonderful. A lot of people are realizing that the history books, there's a lot that's been left out, and our ancestors were a lot more technologically advanced than what they're letting on. So, yeah, it's very important, and a lot of people find this subject intriguing. Is that the common theme that you two have encountered during this time doing this work?
Yeah, you can answer that, Cambell. You've been here. Cambell's the old man of Tartaria.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, we're all pretty much all the channels are shadow banned, but we're all still growing. And we're just at the point now where it's starting to spread out into different niches. You know, it's been sort of a small kind of, kind of community that hasn't sort of gone that far, but now I'm doing interviews with people that are on totally different topics and stuff, and everywhere I talk, it's getting really well received. So everyone's really interested, because the thing is, we can just say, go and have a walk around your city, and people go around with different eyes and they'll just blow their mind and go, oh my God. So yeah, it's very well received.
Yeah, it's really fun like that, because this is one topic of all the topics in the disclosure truth movement that is so tangible. You literally can go and see it, touch it, taste. You could taste it if you want. Touch it, taste it, see it with your own eyes wherever you are in Australia and indeed the world. So it's a really exciting topic to explore for people. I think, we so often get not overwhelmed, but a lot of this disclosure truth community, we're stuck online listening to, insiders, inverted commas, and getting all this content that really it's not a tangible, it's not tangible content for us to go and actually participate in ourselves. So Tartaria is just fantastic for that. And I would say it's a big fucking relief for people to actually have something to go and look at, to actually go and dig their own teeth into and see it for their own eyes. Like, what a massive difference this has made within our community. Like, that's where the magic is. That's where the energy is. That's where the sort of enthusiasm's coming from, that it's it's out there and you can go and, get into it yourself. It's not something you actually have to wait for someone to tell you about. So that's the magic of Tartaria.
It really is excellent that you can direct the viewers out to these locations. They can see for themselves. The writing's on the wall. Yeah. And it's all evidence in plain sight, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's totally in plain sight. I think Cambell's just frozen.
Oh, okay.
Hey, buddy. Anyway, yeah, he'll rejoin us. So, Jeff, you have a channel called We Are Change Melbourne, and that's really exciting because you've been sort of championing, the truth movement here in Melbourne and Australia for many years now. And you've sort of this Tartaria topic has sort of been a relatively new one to come across your channels. And it's really exciting that your viewers are getting into it, because of course, why not? So in my mind, this is probably the biggest program buster available to us. Once you get your head around the fact of the level of deception, it's very easy to sort of start dropping programs left, right, and center. So on that level, Tartaria is very powerful in leading, I guess, the consciousness of that truth movement to a whole new paradigm shift. So I get very excited about talking about it from that perspective.
I enjoy it too. And with my channel, I like to provide a lot of variety, something for everybody. And this subject was, yes, it really went down well with the viewers. Everybody really appreciated it. And what's good as well, it's not a controversial topic. So not a lot of people are going to get triggered, and it's not going to ruffle too many people's feathers. So it's wonderful like that. And, you're not going to worry about YouTube trying to take the video down. So, yeah, it's a pleasant topic and it's a wonderful subject to cover. And yes, there's just so much research and study that's involved, and there is a lot of merit to it. So it's wonderful to see the reaction from the audience, and some of the comments are really lovely too. We can go into those a bit later on in the show.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I know Campbell would agree with is that, you know, what's delightful about the Tartaria topic is it really allows you to use your imagination again. It really allows you to chew on some of the more, you know, creative and everything we're looking at with the Tartaria culture is just beautiful. You know, everything is beautiful, advanced, high frequency, and we're looking at it from the level of our current day culture, and it's such a contrast. And from that, you know, all we really ever ask of our audience is to enjoy making stuff, enjoy the theories, enjoy the wiring and firing of dots, enjoy the chewing on it, enjoy the how does this all connect, because Tartaria is by far conclusive. It's by far concluded. You know, there's just so it's really up to us to explore using our beautiful God-given imaginations of how to wire and fire this information to continue to build a broader and broader and broader story around the topic. And, you know, Campbell and I love that side of this. It's just one of our favorite elements. Would you agree, Campbell?
Yeah, definitely. And that's a big part of it is, you know, we can't get to, you know, still to a lot of this information. So a lot of it starts off as, you know, just, wow, what could that be? And the wonder of it all, and putting theories together and throwing them out there. And the best thing is, you know, the audience, right? We throw theories out and the information that comes back is just amazing. And that's another really big part of this is, you know, everyone can be involved.
Yeah.
You know, with a lot of these topics, you get people that have gone down a rabbit hole for 20 years and they're talking about, you know, disclosure and stuff that we can't verify. You know, with Tartaria, people can go and check out a bit, and they do. They go out with their cameras and their phones and they just talk about a building they find. And then they're in there and everyone can make their own discoveries and be a part of it and be a part of the unfolding and the story. And so it's just the best topic. And as you mentioned, it's not dark, it's not scary. There's no, you know, it's not, you know, it's not one of those icky rabbit holes, you know, it's good, it's fun. So, but at the same time, it's the ultimate disclosure. When you understand this, you understand everything's a lie. So it's a good way to get there by diverting the darkness.
And it's so much fun because, you know, when everyone discovers Tartaria for the first time and they go outside to look at it for the first time, you know, this is constantly, oh my God, how did I not see this before? Oh my God, how did I not see this before? Now it's all I can see. It's everywhere. I can't believe it. And like that, like magic is, it throws our audience back into innocence, you know, like back into the wonderment of it all, back into the, wow, you're telling me giants are real. You're telling me that castles are real. You're telling me that star forts, you know, you tell like the you know, all the creatures and the characters that make up this consciousness are freaking fantastic. So on that level, it really is a re-inspired, reimagined, energetic boost for those who are interested in disclosure and truth. So, you know, if you want to step back into the innocence and the awe and wonderment of this realm and all of what this realm can offer us, Tartaria is a freaking fantastic place to start.
It certainly is. And a lot of people, their imagination can go with them as well when they start to look, and, you know, they feel young again looking at some of this giants and myths and going back to some of the tales. A fascinating subject I've been looking into is Göbekli Tepe, which is believed to be the world's first temple. And the Turkish mayor claims that non-human beings could have created this and built this 12,000 plus year old Göbekli Tepe. And yes, it's really fascinating. They noted down some of the scriptures. It showed people wearing attire that wasn't with that timeline. So it was out of error. So yes, it's fantastic information, enough evidence to suggest that this ancient site has been absent from history. So a lot of people are studying this, Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, and very important information when they excavate materials that weren't in that time period, that what they say. So yes, there's seeing is believing, and there's a lot of research that needs to be done. We're still learning, aren't we?
Let's bring it up, Jeff. You got it on your screen. Let's bring it up and have a little look at it.
Okay.
So for anyone who doesn't know, Göbekli Tepe, I think they discovered it 1998 by a farmer who just saw something randomly popping out of the ground and then ended up excavating it. And the story they're giving us is that it was built and then it was purposely covered, filled in with dirt 11,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And when you look, it's got all these T blocks in it, and they've got animals carved into it. A lot of them, we don't even know what they are, and a lot of them are not native to that area. So, you know, they're not native there now.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so it's, there is a little bit of, you know, controversy with the dating and stuff. I'm not sure if I would agree with the dating on that.
Oh, okay, yep.
Mainly because, you know, we study a lot of maps. And that area, you know, as far as we can tell, that was all green, like we're talking hundreds of years ago. I mean, this is the thing with Tartaria. Like, I think, you know, most of us probably came up, you know, with the work of, you know, Graham Hancock and all these kind of people, Hugh Newman and all the other ones, and the megalith kind of look. But what we've discovered is because history tends to push things back and say they're further away. It's all back in the past, back, where our research is bringing it all forward. And we're saying, no, it's not that old. It's not that far back in the past. And then the reason that it looks like it is another, you know, there's so many side topics to, you know, Tartarian research, but resets. You know, we're not taught about resets anymore, and it used to be taught in schools and stuff in the 1800s, catastrophism, all this kind of stuff, and resets explain why we have all this mix, and we have things that look, you know, tens of thousands of years old, and some, you know, that are just as buried, that look hundreds of years old, right? And it's because the time, it comes back to the timeline, right? The timeline and the story they've given us is just incorrect. So that's sort of the biggest part, is we're trying to reconstruct some kind of timeline.
I definitely a big chunk of the theorizing around Tartaria is that they've hijacked history to give us a sense of time and space, and that, so to give us this like coherent sense of time and space. But I remember way back when I was at school and we were, you know, jumping from the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans, and I just remember thinking, these are like chapters in a book that have nothing in between, like they've been cut in and edited, and it wasn't coherent as a timeline. And because my brain wires and fires on, I've got this, I put things in categories and line them up in certain ways. So my brain's always worked. History never made sense to me. And I've always remembered that. So obviously through my process with truth seeking, history was always a big part of my dilemma, if you like. So I know with our Tartaria work, they have used the deception to stretch out the timeline to give us a sense that of that sort of Darwin scale of evolution. You know, we started as amoebas to monkeys to going through that chain, and there's this, you know, and they always lead us to the conclusion that what came before us was less evolved than what we are now. What was offered to us as history, you know, we came from essentially monkeys to cavemen to, you know, the Neanderthals, right up to like, hey, here we are, the most advanced civilization. But Tartaria has completely blown that theory out of the water, because now we're like, hang on a minute, look around us, look at the architecture, look at the technology, look what was available to the civilization even in the 1900s compared to today. And it's very clearly obvious, because that's the other thing, we just always is looking at what is obvious with our eyes. That, you know, we didn't come from this, you know, less evolved civilization. In fact, one would say we are way less evolved than the civilization we are studying currently by Tartaria. So just mental note with looking at sort of you know, our archaeological digs and how they've been dated through history. And they do use them as props to send up this timeline to us. Yeah.
Very well said. That's a strong statement as well. And it serves the government's agenda to keep us at a disadvantage where we're not familiar with history. We can't be connected to certain cultures. And it keeps us in a state where we're destabilized and we're not aware of our true potential and where we came from. So that serves their purpose, doesn't it? To try and hide, fabricate history and suppress evidence. That serves to their advantage, doesn't it, when they do that? And we covered before changing dates of when buildings were established. Sometimes they'll just put a 1 on the front to, it's very deceitful the way this is all structured, isn't it? It's a calculated effort.
100%. So unbelievably calculated. The deception is so unbelievable. They have literally, from the last 300 years on, have absolutely written our history in. Might as well have hired a team of 1,000 fiction writers. Like, that is literally the state of our history right now. Cambell and I very rarely, almost never, would come across some like claim about when a building was created or when this was happened or this time period where we've gone, that's right, that works. But it never is that way. It's always just completely all the characters, all the people who are attributed to the great feats, all fiction.
Yes,
it's crazy.
Absolutely. And a lot of people are waking up to the structures that have been built, as well as the roads. If you look at some of the old roads, the cobblestone, how it's built to last the test of time. And if you see some of the roads nowadays, there's potholes. It's virtually unsafe, a lot of it, to be driving on, and it takes them that long to come and fix it. It's it's really not practical. So it's like the level of competence has really been degraded over time, and that's done by design, isn't it?
Yeah. It's done for money, so they can control us.
That's right.
Pretty much every city used to have a tram system that was free transport all throughout the city. And, a certain family went in and bought them all out and closed them all down, and because they wanted to sell petrol, but also they wanted to control, they didn't want people traveling for free and all this kind of stuff. And now look what we've got. We've just got these cities that you can't even drive in anymore. Like, literally, you can't park. They're just polluted. And like I said, they used to all have tram lines in. They were all ripped out. And we're sort of told, they were all built, 1890s, around 1900, and then by the 1930s or 40s, they just rip it all out. I mean, it's the stories we get they just don't make any sense at all. Buildings, being built in 3 years, and things like, entire World's Fairs being built in 3 years. And then when we look into it, you find out that they built a cathedral last century and it took them 72 years. So nothing lines up. They give all these stories and they make it up. And but the reason is all the book burnings, right? Everyone knows what a book burning is, starting back with Alexandria. And in Australia here, everything, they tell us, all the records from colonisation and everything were kept in the World's Fair building in Sydney. And of course that burnt to the ground, taking all of the knowledge with it. And this is such a common thing. It just got destroyed, right? Just got destroyed. I mean, look at NASA, right? They can't go back to the moon because we just lost all the data. Sorry.
I mean,
Exactly.
it's so fantastic. Like, the amount of destruction by a fire, it's just like systematic in every capital city around the world. But if you look at sort of the beautiful, amazing, like, we're really privileged here in Australia on this topic, because we have a really small container, as in we're only talking, according to common history, of 250 years. And alongside that, the indigenous history, which Cambell and I are fascinated by, to like how to juxtapose these two bodies of work and consciousness. But interestingly, like, if you look at when these buildings all went up, like the library behind me or Flinders Street Station behind Cambell, these buildings, they took 1 or 2 years, like, that's usually the timeline, 1 or 2 years, and they round sort of like the late 1800s, when Australia was basically a tiny little colony with no resources, no manufacturing resources. Like, everything literally had to be shipped in on tall boats from, UK or wherever. Like, virtually, like, ridiculous story. But what's even more ridiculous on top of that is that so many of these buildings that were apparently built in 1880 or 1890, then they ripped them all down in like 1910 or 1920. So what our history books tell us, and Cambell and I We've been through all these capital cities in Australia and looked at all the old buildings, the beautiful old massive gorgeous buildings made out of amazingly strong structures that have all been ripped down. And like, if you're a young nation who have just spent like all this time and energy to build these fantastic, beautiful, gorgeous buildings that we didn't build, that we were attributed to, why on earth would you then bother to rip them down after 20, 30, 40 years? Like, that is another layer of ridiculousness on top of the idea that we even built them in the first place. And then you look at sort of the scale of all these structures. When you're looking at Australia specifically, it doesn't make sense. Why would we, as a young, burgeoning, struggling nation, young colony, I'll say, in all our little young colony capital cities, end up building these structures that are mega big, huge, absolutely huge structures, huge doorways, huge windows, huge columns, huge bell towers? Like, none of the reasoning behind why we would build these buildings in the first place lines up when we're talking about such a young colony. Like, we can, and that gets lost in the European sort of like debunking of history, because they've got such a long history. But here in Australia, we didn't have that. Apparently we don't have that. So why would we build such, when really a young colony should be looking at, you know, first and foremost, how to get food, how to grow food, first and foremost, how to like build like basic simple structures, you know, using hardly any resources. Like, it's not like they had a shop to go and buy nails and hammers and, you know, wood. Like, this has all had to be sourced from the land. And yet we see them focusing their energies on mega structures like a national library, or epic buildings like Flinders Street Station, or huge town halls, or massive mega post offices or government buildings. Or let's not even mention the amount of energy and effort that went in with the orphanages and lunatic asylums here in Australia. Why would you focus your resources and energy on a lunatic asylum when you're a brand new colony? Makes no sense.
100%. And that should be a crime against humanity, to destroy or demolish any heritage listed or historic buildings. That serves as a very important timepiece for people to really appreciate. So it's a very criminal element when they go as far as to do that, destroy or remove anything like that. Now, yes, that's it should go to a vote, and that shouldn't be allowed to happen. It's like they're trying to cover up evidence. That's how that appears. And there's so much history that we haven't been told about. Now, the view was, even with the Amazon, that humans hadn't entered until 1,000 years ago, and that's gradually changing. A lot of people are realizing this due to the clearances in the Amazon. They're cutting down process that is taking place. Evidence is starting to emerge of lost civilizations and cities with advanced arts and crafts. This is mind-blowing, isn't it?
What say you, Campbell, on the Amazon?
The Amazon, there's tons in there. There's a guy who's dead now, Father Crespi, who was around back in the sort of 70s and 80s, and he ended up amassing this collection of basically, most of it was gold, just all these anomalous artifacts. And it was all they were basically brought to him because he was, you know, he was a really nice guy looking after people, and they'd bring him all these things, like there's a giant crown, like a crown that is literally made for someone who, you know, is 20 foot tall or something. A giant guitar, like all these anomalous things, and they've all come from South America, all on gold, and all clearly for people bigger than us. We also found a town, I think Michelle Gibson actually found it, in the middle of the Amazon forest, and we got photos from the late 1800s, and it's got a complete tram system in it, an electric tram system, and it's just literally just in the middle of nowhere. And another thing about South America is down the bottom end is Patagonia, which is known as the land of the giants. So yeah, I mean, I think they're going to find a lot there, because the giant thing they try and hide, but this is the thing with Tartaria, and why it's so you know, why it sort of excites people's imagination so much, is all of this this was our imagination, right? When we were little kids, this was, you know, the fairy tales, the kings, the castles, the magic, all the cool stuff. But then we hit school and they go, no, forget that. That's silly, ridiculous children's stuff. Forget it. And then people start, you know, hearing about Tartaria and it's like, hang on, maybe that was the truth.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, you know, the fairy tales are the truth and the news is the lie.
Yeah, agreed. And because you don't even realize until you start looking how many freaking castles there are around the world. Like there are so many amazing Camelot style castles. Like they're freaking look at RMIT, Jeff, here in Melbourne. Like it looks like freaking Camelot. Like it's Harry Potter everywhere, you know, like it's simply across the whole realm. We literally have all of those cartoons and storybooks we grew up with are freaking real. And yet because most people dismiss that, they sort of made a mental note occasionally here and there that, there's a castle maybe in Germany or there's one, but actually there's literally hundreds and hundreds of them. And then when you start looking at that, then you come across the star forts, which for anyone on Jeff's channel who's not researched star forts, they are fucking so much fun, mind-blowing. Literally these, well, this is Campbell's specialty, but literally these forts that are mimicked of, well, they're called star forts because they have that star shape, but like they also look very similar to sort of like when you put a frequency into water and you get that resonance of water coming out. And man, they're beautiful and they're everywhere, but you wouldn't even know about them. That's how deceived and programmed we are. 95% of the population would not know what a star fort was and would have simply no idea that they existed to the level of how many are on this realm. It's insane.
Yeah, it really is magic. And yes, the starports, the Stargate, there was even a place, the Ziggurat, wasn't there? And they were guarding that. That was like Fort Knox. They were trying to keep people out of there, and for good reason, because they were trying to cover up for something there, weren't they?
I mean, what an effort they've had to make, like, and especially now, like we're all just like consciousness is waking up to all this information, is literally waking up out of the darkness, literally the descent from light to darkness and back up from darkness to light again, the uncovering of all of this. And they have to scramble now. Like we're putting them on their toes. They have to like really work hard to keep this fairy tale of theirs. They've hijacked the fairy tales and that were real and told us they're fairy tales, and now they have to continue on their actual fairy tale, which is the non-truth. And man, it would be hard. Like it's going to be fun watching them try to deal with this topic as it actually reaches it would probably never reach the masses of the consciousness, but certainly it will spread through the truth movement very quickly, I believe.
I think so too. And there's so many anomalies that need to be looked into. Like when you factor in the fact that, did they have qualifications? Did they have degrees? Was there a building code? All of these that are put in place now that they just didn't have then. And if you look at the cathedrals, some of the acoustics and the sound, it's absolutely marvelous the way they've done that, haven't they? Very hard to replicate that even in these current times.
Yeah. I mean, see, we look at a lot of these buildings. We don't necessarily look at them as buildings as we're told what a building is, you know, as far as somewhere, you know, with a roof for people to stand inside. We think a lot of these are basically machines. So cathedrals especially, I mean, cathedrals are always oversized. They're massive for no reason that we're given.
Yeah.
And they all have these, you know, they all have the spires, and they all have, you know, the basilicas have the domes, and they all have things to do with sound and frequency, right?
And light.
Bells, which have all been taken out. They used to have choirs, and of course the organs. And I mean, how's that for a word, right?
Yes.
Organ. It's good for your organs, right? And this is all frequencies. And then when you look at the cathedrals, even the windows, you know, the rose glass or the stained glass windows, they're all cymatic symbols. So that, as far as we can work out, that they were creating noise and pushing it through those windows to put out a certain frequency, which was a healing frequency. Yeah. And this is where the, you know, the power of God came from. This is why they were turned into religious buildings, because you literally feel different when you go in there, right? That, you know, you feel close to God.
Yeah.
Then we get that
That's a very
question,
good
what is
point.
God, or what are they telling us God is, you know?
Very well said, Campbell. And yeah, when people look into that, the frequencies, that's something I've covered here at We Are Change Melbourne a couple of times in the last few episodes. The 428 hertz for healing and 528, the frequency, the sound healing of love, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, that's very interesting information that not a lot of people are aware of, that how sounds can have an effect on the mind and body.
Hardcore sounds and light. So one of the things that we've been looking at is how they've actually hijacked our natural light spectrum, the way that we can, and how we can perceive light. Last night we were talking about this theory about Tartaria actually having two suns, and in those two sun concept that the Tartarian civilization were exposed to 20, well, they had no time. With two suns, they just had light all the time and no sense of darkness. And as we were hijacked with the removal of one of the suns and replacing it with the moon, we descended into darkness for the first time. A terrifying concept if you're a civilization that's lived purely in the light. And so as they've done that, they then altered, and we know for sure that when this reset happened, they dismantled all the technology. And that technology for us, we would refer to as living technology. It was a high frequency technology built into the culture and civilization, designed to harness the light spectrum, harness the ether, which I believe is a more higher frequency word than electricity. So to harness the ether, to feed it back through the buildings, the fashion, the landscape of their culture, and utilizing the living waters. Those three elements were in harmony. They were working together. So they had a full light spectrum, which meant they could perceive things through a full light spectrum. They had beautiful living water full of light, and they had sound and the frequency of sound. And all of that combined provided a very advanced, very high frequency, high vibrational civilization, which we can say we have evidence of across the whole realm. These beautiful feats of, you know, and I don't know if you know this, Jeff, but when we look at the great masterpieces, the artworks sort of that have been dated back to the sort of, you know, 15th century or whatever, that we can't replicate today, you know, those extraordinary ones that paint in and capture light and the detail without photography is insane. And when you analyze how they did that, put that through analysis here with the chemical analysis, they were using pigments that are more refined than our current printing abilities. And we're told that they crushed them up in a mortar and pestle, but like when you analyze it today, like it was more refined, and their ability to create art and music and the written word and architecture and gardening and the beautiful landscapes, all of those things were just highly evolved. So when we look at what they did when they dismantled all the technology, they also then captured that ether, fed it back through their clumsy version of tech, which would be a light bulb, and fed it back to us, which meant that we then could only perceive the spectrum of the ether through their technology. Through now it's like LCDs and LSDs and neon lights and light bulbs, and all our concept of electricity is fed through their light spectrum, which is this very bright, cool white light, very similar to moonlight, which we believe is the hijacked element that somehow hid, removed, replaced our second sun. And so when they descended us into that darkness, and like if you think about it, Jeff, what is the whole truth movement about? It's light versus dark. Mm-hmm. It's about moving up through the dark to the light. It's always that paradox between light and dark, light and dark, light and dark. And we consider that to be the spiritual war that we're actually in. So when we look at Tartaria and where they were and how the hijacking crew, the hijackers actually then took away our ability to perceive using our eyes, the light spectrum, the ultraviolet blue spectrum, you know, and like they descended us into basically infrared, which is where all the scary dark creatures of the night live, all the dark creatures that can see in the dark and terrify us and come up from the underground. Hello, the reptiles, the snakes, the spiders, the scorpions, the vampires, all underground creatures. You can really see how much of an impact it would have had on our biological vehicles and our consciousness. So now we've got half the light quadrant. Our bodies are depleted and we're always starving. And we're not starving for freaking food and hot dogs. We're starving for light. We're literally starving for light and compensating it by eating shit and toxic food because it's been taken away from our reality.
Wonderfully said. And yes, there is a constant battle, light and dark, good and evil, positive and negative. And yes, it's a constant struggle, isn't it? People that are very much Luciferian and have very evil motives, and people on the side of good that want peace and prosperity restored back to the planet, and people that really see the best in others. But yes, that's interesting about the light sources and how they use that for technology with the plasma screens, and
it trains us.
Yeah, and how you did that with the comparison as well with the infrared. Yeah. That's important information. It's my understanding that a lot of this was taught at some of the ancient mystery schools and secret societies. They keep some of this hidden knowledge for themselves, for the elite. And as it gets filtered down, most people aren't privileged to that sort of knowledge. And yes, you touched on Hollywood as well. Sometimes they drip feed some of the truth through films. And yes, especially some of the children's animations, the cartoons. That's where it's the truth in plain sight. But if anybody brings it up, they'll just say, where did you see that in a movie or
it's a fairy tale,
a cartoon? Yes, to try and discredit. And that goes within all of these subjects and fields. There's always infiltrators that try and discredit. They'll say, oh, what you're doing is disrespectful to some of our forefathers that worked very hard here to build these structures, because that's how they've been told, not to ask questions. Do as you're told and don't speak back. That's how a lot of people are brought up, not to question, aren't they?
Yeah, it's the system. It doesn't want you to asking questions. It wants to keep you in line where you're easily controllable. And you know, the whole, disrespect thing, of course, we're seeing that play out in real time at the moment. But all tradition and all this, it's all obligation, right? It's all this, which is really fear. We have the feeling we have to do something, because if we don't, there'll be certain repercussions, right? If you go out and talk and say, oh, they didn't build that, then, you'll offend people and they'll, I don't know what they'll do, look at you with nasty eyes or something. But this is how they keep everyone in line, right? And it's like you said before, that they give you truth in movies and then they lie to you on the TV and they call it news. So that gives people who want to be part of the system and who don't want to think, it gives them the perfect out, doesn't it? Well, what do you mean? It wasn't on the news, so it's not true, or it was in a movie, so it's false. Yeah. They don't understand what's going on here, and that it's what it comes down to is the people who are making the rules, that they're not making them for us.
Yeah,
exactly.
People don't want to accept that.
Well, it's exactly like the moon landing. They present a false image, or they replace one actual real sun from the light civilization, from the son of man, and they replace it with the moon, and then they basically fabricate this moon landing, which then gives that moon credibility as a solid body and introduces the world to space. Like the actual whole reality around the moon happened in a Hollywood set. It's a Hollywood set. So it is essentially a movie. The whole moon story is a movie that we've been presented to, but then it's written and presented on the news as reality. And it's always really tricky like that. But you know what? The thing that gets us through all of this, see, they can drip feed all this information to us. They can fuck with all the information. They can deny and keep it to themselves and keep the information hidden. But they can't stop us from asking what if. They can't stop us from actually asking, but what if this? Or what if this? Or what if the world was like this? Or what if there was two suns? Or what if there were giant? What if? Our imaginations are the key to our unfolding all of this. We don't need insiders. We don't need exposure to their hidden information. We don't need to go into their great hidden libraries where they've stolen and contained all the information, because we are the creator beings. We are that came from Tartaria. We are those incarnated souls. We call ourselves light workers because we have incarnated from the light civilization, and we are here today to ascend back up there and take everyone with us. That's what we are. We don't need them. We don't need their proof or evidence. We don't need them to disclose what's in there under the Vatican. Fuck it. All we need is our beautiful, divinely inspired imaginations to ask the right questions, to have a beautiful community around us, or sit there and chew on it together and put it all together. And we will know the story way, way quicker than they'll ever disclose it. So we don't need them anymore. And once you guys, once the world realizes this, that truth, that seed of truth is actually in our minds, it is our imagination, it's our God-given right and creed, man, there's nothing stopping us. And very soon, we will all be very keen remote viewers, which means they can't hide anything. Because when you can turn on that remote viewing faculty, when that's activated in us, as these energies are changing, we're going up that light spectrum, we can go and see anything throughout all time, because time doesn't exist, throughout all space, because space doesn't exist, and we can do it all from the inner workings of our own consciousness. It's amazing. I would be terrified of us. If I was them, I would be fucking terrified of us, because nothing will be out of bounds. It's a program to think that this shit is out of bounds for us. It's just like completely there for the taking once you unlock your gorgeous, inspired imaginations.
That's beautifully said, Kelly. And I admire your enthusiasm with this subject as well. And I'm sure people really applaud that as well. I'd like to see everyone be inquisitive and have a natural desire to want to learn as much as they can about history and explain it to their friends and families. It's a wonderful conversation point over dinner or at family gatherings. Everybody should be opening up lines of discussion in regards of this. And on that line, I think it'd be good to discuss a couple of the comments from the viewers, because
let's go.
Campbell,
you can respond.
People's take on it and different opinions. It's always important when making an informed decision. Sure. So a comment here, Jim says, referring to our last episode that we did, Kelly, Jim says, this was a huge eye-opener. I always wondered why the standard of architecture dropped so much and how they managed to build those extraordinary buildings. So that's one example of someone that was that noticed, hang on, there's a little bit more going on than meets the eye, isn't there?
Far out. And you know what? Why is there always a freaking Chinatown in every capital city? Why do we have a Chinatown built in, which seemingly got built in right from day dot? But it's just exactly when the colonists arrived, there was a Chinatown. It's just a really weird glitch. It's just a really weird thing. I mean, I love Chinatown. It's fun as a fun, go out for dinner. But why does every capital city have a Chinatown specifically? Why was that built in?
That's a good question too. More people should ask that as well. Now we have Adam here. He says, the first shipment of glass to Australia was from the Pilkington brothers in 1856. So where did the massive Gothic buildings with their beautiful glass windows come from that were built prior to 1856? And if they were supplied by the colony, why was there a need to import them?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. There's tons of buildings built before then, and that's a big thing. Glass is a big thing, because the World's Fairs, the first modern World's Fair was 1851, and the main building was called the Crystal Palace, because it was literally a massive glass house. And when you look into it, they didn't have the ability to make that glass, let alone the amount of glass. And then of course, the best story about that is this glass and iron building burnt. No, what happened? That first they moved it, they took it down, they moved it, and this thing covered acres.
Yeah.
But when they put it back up, it looked different. They just decided to rearrange it, so it was a different building, and then it burnt down. And we get this all over the place. But But in Australia, this is a thing, and Kelly sort of mentioned it before, is in a new land, you're worried about living, about surviving, you're worried about your food.
Snakes.
The biggest buildings aren't going to be the houses. They're not going to be the courthouses. They're going to be the sheds, the stuff for processing food, for storing food. Okay, but we don't see that. We get these massive, masonry buildings, and you look into it and there's no quarries. There's no clay pits and kilns to make the bricks. There's no glass manufacturers. There's no silica mines. There's no iron mines. And it's like, well, where did all this material come from? And they just gloss over it. They just sort of tell you, oh, this one person built this building and it took them this, and this is a bit of their history, and that's all we get.
Yep.
And in Australia, of course, the workforce were convicts, right, at the start. And on the first fleet, they forgot the tools. The first fleet that we're told that got, and they even say that in the history books, they say they got here and they realized they didn't bring any tools with them. I mean, it's just a ridiculous
and also these convicts
story.
were freaking starving to death and fully, like, completely brought to the brink of their life force by the trip over here. Like, they weren't, and now a lot of them were kids, they were just like, little dudes who are now scrawny little, very sick, scurvy dudes who, did not build that building behind me. They just didn't. Like, I don't know. It's like saying, this group of 20 preschool kids built Flinders Street Station. Like, it's
just not practical, is it?
Oh, God.
And when you're bringing people over on ships, you need to have enough food and water, and then you're going to have people fighting, and then you have disease, and you have all the rest on top. It's not logical. Yeah. And I think
animals.
Yeah, all of that. And it's insulting to people's intelligence to try and convey that to them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. Sorry, go Campbell.
We never thought about the horse. Well, I never thought about the horses until a couple of years ago when I started looking into this. And I thought, they want me to believe they put a couple of horses on this little tiny wooden boat, floated in, like this across waves for 6 to 9 months, had to feed it. It couldn't, how did they exercise it? And it got off the other end, as a horse strong enough to live and to breed. And then when you look at the story about the camels, they say they brought 2 across, but 1 died. And then they don't explain anything. Then they just say suddenly there were thousands of feral camels.
Yeah.
So who this camel was mating with, we don't know. But you find stuff like this all through the history. And it's either like they're just so bad at their job, or I don't know. It's almost like they're leaving it, like telling us this is all crap, because it doesn't make sense.
Of course, we're still to get to the heart of how our Indigenous history sits juxtaposed to the Tartarian history and storyline here in Australia. Like, we're still trying to figure out that. Now, there's a lot of untold stories from our elders, and I think, as we're getting closer and closer to this, like, moving up the light spectrum, and our eyes are going to adjust, which Campbell and I sort of came into this topic with the Crystal City concept, which is just a frequency shift of what could be there that we're not able to see at the moment. But literally, according to just what we know now, all of the capital cities in Australia and basically the realm, the world, were not founded. They were found dead, and they were covered in some form of mud, which potentially could have just been the remains of the civilization that came before, and that was concentrated in the cities. But if we to juxtapose that information, that would mean our Indigenous brothers and sisters were living alongside that dead city or that civilization, and they would have had an integrated knowledge and awareness, but we don't see it fed back in the Indigenous Dreamtime stories or the Indigenous stories. However, Campbell, I did realize last night, thanks to a really smart comment on our channel, that the Indigenous flag is literally yellow, red, and black, like the black sun, the yellow sun, the red sun. I just thought it was the Indigenous flag is something to look at in relation to our conversation. And so Campbell and I have been asking, and we've spoken to a few elders on the show, how does this information sit alongside your information? But actually, we may have just been asking the wrong question. I think we should revisit it and say, do you have stories of there being two suns? Because the indigenous history, according to their narrative, is 40,000 years old at minimum, so which means that they have lived through or have experienced through many resets, and should have conversation on the topic of how many suns were there pre 300 years ago. Now, bringing back that notion of there being two suns, it explains so much about what happened here on planet Earth, realm Earth. And so that's one topic that definitely requires much more imagination to try to weave together, much more what if questioning to weave together. And one of the ones that Cambell and I will continue to explore, because most of the elders have never been asked these questions, which is why we don't have much information about it. They just simply have never had a consciousness available to them to say, what about this? What about the giants? What about sun? Blah, blah, blah. So, my point of all that is that as we theorize and imagine forward, we'll be able to ask new questions and link in conversations that have never been had because no one's asked the damn question. And we haven't asked the question because we've never got to this point in consciousness before. So we really are, obviously Cambell and I, we've got our heads, and most of the Tartarian community have got their heads around the basic, mudflood, architecture, giants, flat earth. We've got the head around the basics, but there is so much more to come. There is so much more to unravel and to explore on this topic. We're at the beginning of the most fantastic story we could ever, it's going to be what we imagine, because it's going to come down to that. But far out, Tartaria has just started as a conscious shift. It's just started. So don't feel like you're you're being left behind in any capacity, audience out there. Like, we have got so much more to come.
It really is exciting, isn't it? And if you look at the ancient Sumerian texts, you look at the indigenous, many different cultures all around the world, you do see a reptilian theme come into play as well. Non-human beings. So, yes, when you see many different cultures and they all say something that is very similar, that gives credence to it as well, doesn't it?
What say you about reptilians, Cambell?
So what was that? Reptilians?
Yeah. Creatures of the night.
What say me? Yeah, well, I mean, this is, it's obviously, it's a symbol for them going back to, the garden, right? That was a reptilian, and it's all about, the reptilian lying, basically fooling us, right? Fooling us, giving us the wrong information, making us make wrong decisions. And that story is alive and well today, with lots of, what can be taken as evidence. We've got this stuff everywhere. But to me, what this is, I mean, we've been invaded, right? To put it simply, we've been invaded. At some point, and the reptilian is just the expression of this invader, called the archon, the demiurge, and all these sort of ancient talkings. It's the same thing, and it's an entity, right? But it can control other people that we think are humans, and that's all these people that we see walking around, right? And the way that we see that energy, I think the way that we perceive it is as a reptilian nature. And we all have a reptilian brain, right? We know this, and that's just the fight or flight brain. It's got no empathy. And so and this is sort of where it goes back to energy. Like everything is, and we've just been taught the wrong thing, how to see the world wrongly. Like everything is, like a frequency has an expression as a color and as a shape and as a sound and as all these different things. So everything's, when we're talking reptilians, we can link it to all these different things, like, the reptilian brain and to the DNA, and we can get into all that kind, it all links up. And that's how we sort of have to approach this topic, because we can't spend our lives quoting books because our research is telling us the books are wrong. And this is what we see today, is we've got a lot of people and they're just like, but I read it in a book. It's the fact. Listen to me. But then you ask the person, well, tell me about the author of this book. Who are they? Where they get that information? They don't know. So we're stuck in this paradigm of people passing on opinions as fact, right? But we all know opinions are like, bums, right? We've all got one. And most of them are full of something. So this topic is very much an imagination, and we've done it many times. We've put out theories. For example, like with all these buildings, like we just started asking the question, are these all red brick? Because we see them, they're all facade and they all look different. And then after a few months of asking that as a community, we started finding pictures, where the corners knocked off, and there you go, it's all red brick. So that's what's really driving this forward. This movement it's the imagination and putting out concepts and asking questions, because obviously, if you don't ask the right question, you can never get the right answer, right? But that's how we've got to go forward. We can't rely on this, the authors, right, or authors who write his story. That we can't go on that anymore, because we know it's just all it's lies, right? It's either a complete lie or it's based on opinions that were wrong. And so that's where you find ourselves. And look around, like that's why everything's collapsing, because we're all starting to realize it's not real.
And there's
Great job explaining that.
There's no gurus in this space. There literally is no gurus in this space, because this space is open for everyone. And we don't want insiders. We don't want like special, people saying, I've got this information that I can't tell you where from, but here it is. No, it's not about Tartaria. Tartaria is about each one of us participating with our beautiful imaginations. And on that topic, Cambell, you just said something really interesting there that just triggered an idea in my head. On the idea of the reptilian part of our brain, and imagine, and also the connection to the reptilian draconian energetic being able to manipulate and use the human vehicle and integrate inside it and basically hijack the human vehicle, which is, where we get all this satanic underbelly theme running through all of our governments and Hollywood and blah, blah, blah. They've been literally, the vril, for example, integrated into the human being, how they exist and can operate above ground. Now imagine if when they removed the sun, the second sun, and replaced it with the moon, that reptilian brain was then integrated as they rebuilt the human DNA from the mud of the mud flood, our DNA. Like imagine if that reptilian brain was a fundamental shift in what they altered in our consciousness to integrate the dark and the light, so they could actually manipulate and utilize it. They would not be able to utilize or hijack a human vehicle if it was pure light. They couldn't do it. Like they wouldn't be able to exist. They wouldn't be able to see through it. They would not be able to plug into the chakra system behind us. Like that reptilian brain could be connected to the removal of the second sun and the replacement of the moon, and then these creatures being able to come up from the underground and like hijack the human vehicle and mind and take over governments in the world and everything they've done, aka They Live the movie. Like interesting. I've just never connected the reptilian brain
it's like an interface.
So
very good description of what's taking place where with that reptilian brain, the pituitary gland, the amygdala, and the pineal gland. In reptiles, the pineal gland actually has a retina, a cornea, and a lens. Like it literally is the third eye. And that's why they're so determined to try and calcify this, so they can restrict the remote viewing skills, the psychic abilities, extrasensory perception, being able to have that inquisitive nature and that spirit. When they can manipulate, like you said, hijack that, then we're controllable. And that's why it becomes like a prison planet, like a slave society.
So maybe that reptilian brain actually isn't like part of our natural evolution. Maybe it was reintroduced 300 years ago with the onset of this hijacking, as they had to reintroduce humanity to like the new version of what reality was going to be. Just a theory, because I've always been taught that like the reptilian brain was like part of us forever, but maybe not.
Well, they don't talk about it much, do they? It's just kind of like the leftover. Oh, you've got a reptilian brain, fight or flight.
Yes.
But we know we've got, well, they tell us, we don't know, but they tell us we've got a fused chromosome, right? They don't explain it. But with the pineal gland as well, that it's not the nicest experiment, but they did an experiment, I think back in the 60s, and they actually removed pineal glands from mice. And yeah, I know, right? And they put them in the chest where what gland's down there? I can't remember the name, but what they put them in where there's another gland because they couldn't get them back in the right spot. But they did this experiment of switching pineal glands around. And what they did is they got old mice and put their pineal glands in young mice, and young mice and put theirs in old mice. And the old mice almost instantly just got young, and they 30%. Then they got 30% more lifespan, and the young ones that got the old pineal gland started aging, and I think they ended up living 25% less. So, like, it proves, a functioning open pineal gland gives us as age as well, right? This is another thing we see in the history, well, in the past, in all the books and the stories, is our lifespan, right? Yes. And it even says in the Bible, after the flood, now your years will be capped at 120. And so that's another part of them shutting down the pineal gland, is they're taking away our longevity, because the longer we live, the more questions we ask, the more we see, right? And so they want us trapped in these little bodies in a short little life where we don't see, and then they just throw us back into the reincarnation cycle, because I don't care if we die, because we're coming back again anyway. Yeah. So that's another part of this whole deception.
That's fascinating, Campbell. That's so interesting. So, Jeff, we also discussed the idea that when you remove the sunlight from, one half of the sunlight and introduce nighttime and daytime and nighttime, it's like plants when they suddenly are forced to grow in the shadows, they don't grow very big, which could represent why we have shrunk from the civilization that built these glorious buildings behind us, who were much bigger than us. And now we sort of sit at this scale. So by removing half of our light quadrant, the second sun, they actually caused us to shrink and stay small. Like, it's impossible for plants to grow big when they're in the shadows. So to connect that also to the pineal gland, Campbell, is an awesome idea. So if they actually, like, then when they rebuilt humanity and reintroduced us into the cities and reintroduced the babies, they did an altercation on the pineal gland and then have bombarded that pineal gland ever since. And potentially, when we look at the poisoning on this realm, the poisoning in every single thing, people like, in the environmental movement, they think it's all random and, this is all shit corporations being, money hungry. But actually, there's a very intelligent and deliberate agenda there to focus in on how they want to manipulate this vehicle. And one of those is absolutely the pineal gland. Hello, fluoride in the water, and all the most basic thing. The most basic thing everyone needs is water. Of course, that's where they would start. I mean, I don't know anyone who drinks tap water from freaking taps anymore. Like, I mean, hello, everyone's sort of, luckily with the truth-seeking movement, one of the things that was very evident 20 years ago was the fluoride in the water conversation, the chemtrails in the sky, and then moving into the GMOs in our food chain. That was a great benefit for the truth seekers out there who've done this their whole life. They have been exposed to, like, these basic facts, and hopefully a lot of them just started to naturally, like, avoid those things to lead us to 2022, where, I would say within the truth-seeking community on a broad scale, our pineal glands are pretty fucking high functioning still, like, we've actually managed to avoid a lot of the shit intuitively that is designed to destroy it, and all the heavy metals that they're constantly bombarding us with. So yes, we definitely should deep dive on that reptilian pineal reset connection.
There's just so many layers to this, isn't there? And it all ties in with the energy grid, and it's everything to keep us off balance. And keep us at a limited state, where, because that's what they're afraid of, the masses waking up to this massive lie and this crime that's taking place. Yes, they fear that. They don't want their positions to be removed from power. That's what drives them, the power, the ego. And like you said, with this Tartaria field, there is no leaders or egos or hierarchy. Everybody's sharing what they learn and formulating opinions, working together to come up with a more informed decision and opinion on what's taking place. Now, there are some methods people try and gauge a timeline with some trees. They do radiocarbon dating, where they cut a tree in half and they count the tree rings. Would you say there's a lot of merit in assessing the age of some of these trees using that formula?
Do you want to start on that one, Cambell?
Gosh, where do we start with trees? I mean, there's massive problems with carbon dating and obviously with that whole sort of process. But with the trees, I mean, it seems to be, it does seem to be an accurate, sort of dating system for trees to a certain age, because obviously the rings are literally, the remains of the bark, right, which it sheds, each year, and then grows another one. So I think that's fairly accurate. But when we look into it, I mean, we've got mountains everywhere and plateaus and mesas that look exactly the same as a tree stump with the tree rings and everything. Yeah. So we see trees generally as what we get now is trees and these forests, and they say, oh, it's an old forest, it's 200 years old. These are saplings, right? These are just
weeds.
Baby little tiny trees. Yeah. Weeds, yeah. And so what we used to have was these massive trees, which also ties into the giantism, right? And they tell us we had giant reptiles and giant dragonflies and giant sloths. They just forget to mention the humans, right?
Yeah.
Everything was bigger back then because the atmosphere was bigger, and that can obviously tie into what Kelly's been talking about. But yeah, the trees, there's a big thing going. We get all these funny photos back from the late 1800s, early 1900s of these guys out there, and they've got like a hand blade saw, one of those big two-handed ones, and they've cut down this tree that's like 10 meters across, and it's got a perfect, that looks like a laser cut, these perfect cuts, and always a photo opportunity. You never see them cutting it, you never see it falling down or anything, you just see them standing there with their saw next to it. So trees are a big part of this. That's another sort of it's like you said, it's such a big topic because we're dealing with history, and what we're finding out is it's all a lie, everything, the whole lot. And so that's so trees, I think they're all just saplings, really. I mean, remember Star Wars where they showed the Ewoks? I mean, I think that's more what was going on, living up in the trees.
Whole
and
cities in trees.
Avatar, is it, with the giant trees and that? So they do tell us in movies.
They do. And so, I mean, I think when it comes to the questions like with, how accurate is carbon dating, I guess it comes down to what question are you asking? How broad can your question go? Like, yes, if you want to test a tree out, in the bush out here in Melbourne, like you're going to get an accurate reading using that methodology. But like, see that mountain over there? Like that's a tree stump, like, can you use the same theory on that? So it's like, again, it's always comes down to how broad and how big is your consciousness that's asking the question, and then how can you apply it to that question, and then how does the science reflect that inquiry? So I think with all those sorts of processes that we go through testing things, at a certain level, it gives you an accurate reading. But, how far up the story and narrative do you want to apply it?
Yeah.
Very well said. You both explained that well.
Just with Göbekli Tepe, that's how they've dated Göbekli Tepe. They've basically dated old fires and bits of carbon. They haven't dated the stone, right? And they do this a lot. They sort of say, we found this and it was in there, so this is the age of the whole site. When we know someone could have rocked up there whatever they say the date was, had a campfire, and then left the next day, and we get told that's the date that the whole thing was built. So there's massive issues with our dating.
I mean, you look at the book Forbidden Archaeology, like everyone's seen that. It's been around for, for 20 years now. Like
Michael Cremo,
I mean, that's basically a summary of all of the abnormalities that they've discovered during archaeological discoveries and digs that do not fit the narrative at fucking all. And it's all ended up in this book that, you know, I mean, I know many people have read it, but like no one else would know it even existed. And most of the evidence is so contradictory to timelines. You know, yes, they may have found like an elephant and dated it back to this time, but you know, how do you explain that gold watch that's sitting in its stomach? You know, like, you know, contradictory things that just don't add up. So all that goes into this category of, you know, hidden, forbidden information, like anything that somehow contradicts the narrative that they want to put out there and have us be programmed to and teach at schools gets completely hidden away again, which goes, then you have to ask the question, like, you know, when it comes to the scientific community, like using these techniques, how free are you to actually do science? How free? I mean, science basis is to never question, never accept the science, like always question the science. And you know, that's not what we see evidence of today, certainly not for the last couple of 100 years. Like, you know, they're just parroting a certain process, and if you come up and contradict it, you know, you lose, you're fired, you lose your funding. We all know the story. So.
Exactly. And that's very alarming when that comes into place. And archaeological cover-ups. How many times has someone dug up a large bone or something like that, and then they've been taken off the project, they've been transferred out, that's been taken off somewhere to the Smithsonian or somewhere like that, they've gotten rid of it, they've covered it up, that information's been suppressed, and the publication, no, they've just stopped that from being published. So, and this is going on with all types of fields. It's being monitored, guarded, and people in positions of power seem to just take over, and that's how they get promoted through that field, isn't it?
Exactly. Experts, right? Experts. That's why, you know, if Kelly and I wanted to go and do a dig at Göbekli Tepe, no way. We couldn't get in there. Even if we sat down and wrote books about it, they wouldn't let us near it. And people think, oh, that's because they're the experts. It's not. It's because they're the gatekeepers.
Exactly.
They're the ones who are making sure that there's only one narrative.
Yeah.
The reason we're not allowed to go in and have a look is we'd come out and say something different, and they'd have to try and explain it away, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's why and also you do see that some, you know, people who start as independent researchers do get access to these sites, you know, after a while. But it's the same thing. It's only because they're telling a narrative that the mainstream want.
Yeah.
And so they'll pump up all these people, and then everyone else say, oh no, they're just lunatics. And you go, but explain this, and they just go, oh no, it's just lunatic. They won't even try. They just basically go straight to putting us down, or anyone with an opinion, you know. And we see this, I mean, look outside, right? This is going on everywhere at the moment. That's what they do, because they've got no explanation. But you just look, there's so many things, you know, they're called UPARTs, right? Out of place artifacts, and they're everywhere. And none of them get explained.
Do you mean bloopers?
No, bloopers, right? From the wrong era. They're errors. But we see it everywhere. It's been documented for years and years, and people still, you know, they think that an anomaly is like a word that you can use, and then suddenly that whatever's the anomaly doesn't count anymore. It's like, well, if you can't explain one anomaly, then there's a massive problem with everything you're saying. You know, down to, we were looking at armor. It's coming up in a few days.
Armor, man.
And on the armor, well, I mean, what the hell is it, right? But on their chainmail, we've got photos of chainmail, and every single link has the stamp of the manufacturer on it. So we're talking stamps. I mean, you need to like a microphone, you know, what are they called? Magnifying glass to see them. And every single one, it's on every single one. And we're told that this was made by some dude sitting on the floor with a hammer back in the 1500s. I mean, it's just impossible. It's impossible. And the same with the statues. And so the thing is, when you find one of these things, that everything falls over, but people don't want to accept that. They just want to sort of go back and say, oh, well, we'll forget, what about this? And it doesn't say that in the book. But so yeah, but I mean, the biggest thing about this is just opening their minds to possibility. That's really what it is. dropping the program from school, understanding it's all for a reason, and that reason isn't for our best interest, so we've got to be smart,
And you both have
ignorance might
done
be
a
bliss,
sensational job at waking people up with your channel, Tartaria
Thank
Australia. It's really wonderful, and it's good to see the success out of this, and more people wake up. Hopefully they feel compelled to go and do their own research, set up their own channels, and start giving lectures and speaking opportunities, taking advantage of those. And the more people get on board with this, we can start unlocking these discoveries, shed a bit of light on this, and really get a new understanding of history, can't we? That's the objective, isn't it?
I mean, ultimately, like, what is the one thing we're all told in school over and over again? Guys, I'm sorry, you can't be explorers anymore. That's not a career option, because everything's been discovered. Everything's been found. Like, every kid wants to be a fucking explorer. They want to be an Indiana Jones, but they say, no, it's all been done. That's a ridiculous idea. But the reality is, like, oh my friggin' God, there is so much to explore on this realm. And you know what, if you're into archaeological digs, like if Cambell and I wanted to do an archaeological, we wouldn't go to where they've got their archaeological digs, like whatever, keep your archaeological, we would tune in and make it up ourselves, and then wait for an intuitive journey to lead us to a location that like we've like found in our own process, and then we just turn up and do whatever we want to do. Like, that's another part of the programming. They will say, look over here, this is where the discoveries are happening over here. And then people's all there, it's like Google Earth. This is here, and then like everything else is sort of eradicated from people's attention. Our world is literally like, we are sold an idea of all the continents here that have all been discovered, they've all been explored. That's it, the end. That's the end of planet Earth, when in actual reality, we know that it's like over here, and then over here, and then over here. And there's literally an uncountable amount of continents, realms, multiverses for us to discover within this realm itself today. There's like layers and layers of frequency bands that we can't perceive. Then going out, there's layers and layers of continents we've never perceived or considered. Like, oh my God, if there was ever a time to get your Indiana Jones on and just go out there and tune in yourself and have your fun. If Cambell and I decided, and we are doing a quest to the desert, when we decide to do that quest to the desert, I absolutely, with all my being, know that we will uncover something extraordinary, because we've asked the question, we are God mind creators, and we will be guided by God mind together. And that's all we need. That's all you need.
100%. And it's wonderful to see people with a positive attitude towards this, and people can start off local in their own towns and cities, checking things out on foot and doing a bit of research. It's very entertaining and educational as well. And learning can be exciting and fun when you find something you're interested in. And that's when it really sets you on that journey. And it was wonderful. You gave some locations people can check out here in Melbourne, and they can go for a walk around the city, the exhibition building, marvelous, and some of the fountains as well. And you look into that.
The city. The whole city. And that's true of every capital
and all the
city.
towns.
And all the towns. They all have something. Yep.
And this is the thing is, people get out there and check out what's close to you, because there's history everywhere. There's stories that don't make sense and interesting things very close to you. So we don't need to travel. We don't need to all do this. Just look in your local area and let's expose the lot of it, right?
Yeah.
I've found remains of star forts in like little country towns in Australia. It's all there. We've just got to get people out there and Indiana Jonesing or Kelly Jonesing again.
Amazing.
I
like looking at some of the old black and white photographs, and you see the horse and carts coming through, and some of the buildings, it's like the windows are at ground level, And some people have said to me, oh, that's just the basement, but it appears like it's been sunken in, and then due to a mud flood or a cataclysm, it's been re-earthed. And yeah, that's why it appears that way. It's been half buried into the ground, hasn't it?
Yep. And look, the fact remains that literally not one township here in Australia was built by us. So wherever you live, you are in essentially part of a civilization that came before you, because we did not, I don't think there's one town Campbell and I've discovered or looked at that hasn't got a Tartarian structure in it. Like, I don't think we ever like randomly just moved somewhere and founded a township. It just hasn't happened. We just like moved around looking for what was already there, and then like found as a town, and then like populated it. So everywhere you live in Australia, anywhere you live in Australia, you are interacting with this lost or hidden civilization, no matter where you are.
It really is marvelous, isn't it? And it makes people excited about the world that they live in, because some people get trapped into this routine, and that's what the government wants. You go to work, you pay your taxes, you're just smart enough to hold down a job and a lifestyle, but not that smart where you start questioning things, connecting dots and working out truths. They don't want that. So yeah, it's all very much designed that, isn't it?
Yeah, look at the metaverse. So they literally show you it's a loop, right, with their logo. People are now asking questions and stuff, and so obviously they started with keeping everyone in their houses because of something, and that's where they're moving to now. They want to put it all into this a bigger loop, right? They've got the outside loop, but we're waking up to it. So like now they're like, oh, here's another loop. Just put this thing on your face and pretend that's who you are, which essentially it's just another fractal down of what this reality is. Because no matter how you want to look at it, pretty much every story says that we've come in here. Whether you look at it as a soul coming into a body, or consciousness coming into a holodeck, or if it's a complete simulation, it's all the same story. We've come in from somewhere else, and so that's that's what we are, right? We're the creators here. This is just something that we get to live in, but someone or a force has just taken over, and they know that all they have to do is change it the way that we perceive it, the way that we see it, and then we start creating their reality for them. And so that's what we need to do. Is they're just trying to step us, they've lost control, so they're like, let's step them down into another fractal reality and get them all with goggles on them, right? And then they'll believe that's reality soon. And that could literally happen if you put it that way. That's how they've changed our perception. If you imagine 3 generations of people and all they do is live their life with goggles on, they're going to start believing that's reality. And they're going to forget that they've got a body, right? And that's kind of essentially what they've done to us. And why everyone's waking up, right? I mean, why do we say waking up? They're taking the goggles off, right? Just like they live. It's all the same thing, everything. So this is the thing. Just throw that stuff away, reject it. It's the false light. It's not going to get you anywhere but into a bigger jail cell. Ask the questions. The questions begin the quest, and quests are fun, much more fun than jobs.
Quest is in questions. That's what it is. A quest is a question. A quest is a question. And what's the one thing you're taught not to do at school? Question the narrative, question the teacher, question the idea, question. You're literally taught not to question, but you start questioning and you're on a quest, my friends. And that is the best way to live your life in this lifetime of the Great Awakening, literally the waking up from the slumber of darkness, the slumber of sleep, of non-creation. We are waking up and we are stepping back to the return of the sun, the return of the sun, and that is going up that light spectrum again. And like every single one of us, if we were to take the heart of the truth seeker within us, we are on a quest because we have started asking questions. So this just takes it to a much more fun level. And if you can join one of the communities, come and join one of the Tartarian communities. You will be in good company, my friends. You will be rejoiced. Yes.
It's very respectable.
Come and check out a live stream or a premiere and get in the chat. And this community is just amazing. Like, yeah, come and join.
It's high vibe.
That's excellent. I feel great connecting with you two there and being able to educate my viewers on what's going on. And it's lovely to see they have an open mind about this topic, and a lot of great input, a lot of good comments too. People chime in and everybody teaches each other. Everybody works together. So it's structured beautifully. Yeah. And yeah, lovely to see people working with one another, and during these difficult times, having an outlet to direct you and focus your energy into that is positive and healthy. Yes, it's an honor to be able to bring this information to the viewers and go on this quest. So,
power of the light workers. It's the power of the light workers coming together. That's what we're here to do. Don't waste this lifetime. That's why you're here, light workers.
Exactly. Don't be discouraged by the education, the indoctrination system. No. The schooling is taught. Try and do away with some of that. And like you said, realize, and you can see things with new eyes, can't you?
Yes.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Realize, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, look, what a cool discussion. That was fun, Jeff. Thank you for joining us today. Or did we join you, or did you join us? I don't know. I feel like we've all been interviewing each other.
We all joined each other.
Really fun.
I think it was mutual. Yes, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to more developments and more discoveries that you both make. You're welcome back here on the show anytime, and continued success with all that you are doing there.
Thanks, Jeff. We've got Cambell and I are going to launch a live event for Tartaria Australia here in Melbourne at the end of June. So we'd love you to come and join us. We'd love you to bring your beautiful brain with you and come and speak. We're going to invite our community to actually come and connect and meet each other for the first freaking time. And we're even going to fly Cambell in from Perth. Isn't that radical of us? Wow. You're actually getting on a plane, Cambell.
Terrific.
God, is that even possible these days?
I don't know. Is it? Can you leave Western Australia? I don't even know.
I'll do it. Even if I have to make a dash for the border, I'll be there. Jump on a kangaroo.
Well, that's been terrific.
Yep. So if you want to come and hang out with us in live and meet your community and actually have full on physical contact with human beings again, and not just in front of the stage and not at a protest, it would be awesome to actually, extend the invitation out. So Jeff, it's been a total pleasure. Thank you for joining us today. That was fun. Mr. Autodidactic, any last words before we sign off?
No, just we'll leave all the links to all the channels underneath. So anyone new who wants to check out and keep up to date on the event as well, just come and subscribe to Kelly or myself, and we'll keep you up to date. And thanks again, Jeff, for your time and everything. It's been fun.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Bye,
go Aussies, man. Love it when the Aussies are in the house having these fully masterful conversations.
Aussie.
Everyone have the most beautiful day ever, and we'll see you soon on Tartaria Australia.
Excellent. See ya.